Welcome to the OBL and ASC Marketing Blueprint, presented by Patient Pro Marketing. This week, we're going to be sitting down with the key members of the Outpatient Endovascular and Interventional Society to explore why supporting this organization matters, more now than ever. OEIS stands at the forefront championing OBL operators who deliver critical outpatient care while navigating the complex landscapes of Medicare reimbursement challenges. From PAD interventions to embolization procedures, the fight for fair payment continues. Let's dive right into this crucial conversation now. Hey everybody, welcome to the OBL and ASC Marketing Blueprint presented by Patient Pro Marketing. If office-based labs disappeared, patients don't lose sight of service, they would actually lose access. So right now, PAD interventions and embolization procedures are being squeezed by reimbursement models that don't reflect reality in the outpatient space. If we don't talk about it, if we don't advocate for it, we don't show up collectively, those services don't stay viable. I'm joined today with the immediate past president of OEIS, Dr. Bob Tahara, and the current president of OEIS, Dr. Patrick Ryan, both physicians who are on the front lines of the OBL endovascular space. We're here today to break down what's really happening with the OBL reimbursements, what it means for PAD, embolization, MSK procedures, and why physician engagement through OEIS is super critical right now. So I'm going to get into this. Thanks, guys, for being here with us. Would you just please introduce yourself and let everyone know where you're from?
I'm Bob Tahara. I'm a vascular surgeon out in rural western or northwestern Pennsylvania. I have practiced in solo practice essentially my entire career. I've been out here 24 years now. I opened my OBL in 2010, which was pretty early, and started with a mix of procedures, and then we transferred essentially 100% of all our endovascular work to the OBL in 2013. And really, the focus of my practice for the entire time has been limb salvage, primarily pedal access, ultrasound-guided interventions, and then I do a pile of complex 𝐏𝐚𝐭 stuff. Those are my two main bailiwicks. Along the way, I've been involved in OEIS essentially since it was instituted. I was one of the first members after the founding members at the first scientific meeting. And then I just finished 2-year term as president. Of course, Dr. Ryan, my good friend, has succeeded me in that post.
Hi there, I'm Patrick Ryan. I'm a vascular surgeon in currently a 2-person group. We're trying to grow to 3, but I also was in solo practice for about, 10 years, 9 years after leaving a big group. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. I have a busy OBL practice, and I do essentially all of my PAD work and embolization work in my office, and I'm currently president of the OEIS.
Awesome. And for those that don't know what OEIS stands for and why it exists, can someone maybe share that with us? Like, why does that OEIS even exist?
Well, the OEIS exists because there is not really a spokesperson, a representative for owners of outpatient, particularly OBLs, office-based labs, and ambulatory surgery centers and hospital outpatient departments. We represent all 3 sites of service. We focus more on OBLs and ASCs, but we have all kinds of members that practice in lots of different locations. And the big societies, SCI, SIR, SVS, they have a lot of people in those societies that are less focused on the outpatient location and place of service, and we are laser focused on outpatient interventions, and we represent people who practice in the outpatient department, do procedures in the outpatient department exclusively, and we are laser focused on representing the interests of those owners, but more importantly, the health of our patients.
So what Patrick just said is really important because I think the OEIS is about a site or space of how to provide care. It's not really competitive with our major mother or parent societies. And that's been a source of real misunderstanding and friction over the years because some of these organizations have felt we were pulling members away from them. And that's not really true. This is very much a complementary endeavor. So we kind of try to focus, like Patrick said, in a laser tight fashion on the outpatient space and advocating for those people doing procedures there. And we try to leave most of the rest of the disease management and some of the other things to kind of the parent societies. And then where that intersection is and where those things overlap, we try to do very coordinated advocacy.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, that opens up to my next question. Physicians, providers understand what an OBL is, what the outpatient or office-based lab is. From a patient's perspective, what does the office-based endovascular care, like, how does that make it possible? Like, what does it make possible versus what the hospital is offering?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting, the evolution of the OBL. So a previous president of OEIS, who's an interventional radiologist in South Florida, Bill Julian, he made the comment some years ago on the podium that some patients are too complicated to do in the hospital. And that created a lot of waves when he first said that. But after a year or two, I actually understood what he was saying, because one of the emphases, or if not the emphasis, of working out of the OBL in particular is it's very patient centric, right? So the patients show up and they're at the same office where they've been evaluated. They see the same staff. They have the same ultrasound tech who may have done their diagnostic study. They're seeing the same physicians. They park in the same spot and they can walk in. They don't have to park 3 miles away and pay in a parking ramp and do all this other stuff. They come into a warm waiting room, and a place that they're already comfortable and familiar with, and then they get taken to a state-of-the-art procedural suite where we've actually optimized everything to take care of those particular types of cases. So in Patrick and in my case, and in the case of a lot of OEIS members, that's complex PAD work, right? Limb salvage work. So I think what ends up happening for the patients is it's a much more patient-centric environment. Everything is optimized to provide the highest quality care. And one of the things that's really striking about the difference about being in an OBL that does affect the patient is the control that the physician has. When I'm in a hospital, and I still do a good chunk, almost half of my work in hospital environments now, you are really at the beck, call, and mercy of hospital administrators. And there's multiple layers of administration, nursing officers, committees. To get a new device or a new wire is a 6 to 12-month process, and you have to go through a value committee. In the OBL, Patrick and I can make a decision, and we can have this initiated within days to weeks as a long front. So what we've been able to do is prioritize the things that we think make the care better for the patient and the patient's going to be more comfortable with. So the environment, as far as the patient goes, is far more patient-centric. It's also more timely. I have limb salvage cases that I'm trying to get done at the hospital, for instance, that the patient lives distant or closer to the hospital, and it takes me 3, 4, 5 weeks sometimes to get these cases on or into the operating room. In the OBL, I can add them in between patients tomorrow if I have staff. It's much more timely for the patients.
Yeah, you said something last weekend on another podcast that really stuck with me. I think it was "time is tissue" or something, right? Was that one of your quotes, right? And I've worked with, like, the PAD Global Association, Kim McNicholas, and hearing and seeing those stories of patients with severe claudications, and literally it's taking days and weeks to get anything approved. And by then, there's no other option. Like, what is the patient supposed to do? So that time is tissue is really, that stuck with me.
Well,
That's
we
real.
get nihilistic about claudication, and certainly have through the major specialties. Patrick did a great session at the SVS VAM a couple years ago that I participated in. That he was gracious enough to invite me on, basically looking at the treatment of claudication. And unfortunately, in our specialty particularly, it sometimes is nihilistic. And it's not necessarily a linear progression, but to your point, you just made, the time is tissue thing. That's much more pressing in the CLTI population. Those folks that are presenting with a truly limb-threatening problem, which is not to say some small percentage of those claudicants won't get there. But they're different disease processes, and unfortunately, a lot of times, although the CLTI is the time is tissue part, we get nihilistic about treating claudicants, and that's probably not the right answer either. It has to be a little bit more judicious and nuanced than that.
There's more to come on the claudication. We probably won't get into it here. I'm presenting it. And Bob's coming with me. I'm gonna make him come with me. I've been invited to a debate in California the week after OBIS, where the debate basically is, okay, the pendulum has swung way too far to the right or left, whatever, on denying treatment to patients with claudication. We need to bring it back. But that's a little more minutia than probably is appropriate for this podcast.
But I think what is appropriate, Patrick, is what you just said about denials. So that goes back to that other podcast that we did, Rach, and the Noridian issue, and how effective OEIS has been at really bringing the guns to bear there to try and solve this problem, because we're living in an era right now where, unfortunately, de facto, insurance companies are dictating care with essentially zero liability through these denials and through some of these administrative claims processes. And again, I've been on record for several years trying to get somebody to introduce an act in Congress that would hold the medical directors and the people who do these decisions for these particularly commercial insurances and Medicare Disadvantage plans liable at the same level Patrick and I are. If we deny limb salvage care and somebody loses their leg, we are at a medical legal liability. How is it somebody can say, we're not going to allow you to do a procedure, we're not going to approve a procedure, and the patient loses their limb, and yet it's scot-free? The company just doesn't pay and the patient loses a limb. That's insane.
Well, why do you think policymakers or like the payers, what are they misunderstanding about these procedures that what do they not understand? I mean, it seems pretty easy to me.
Not to be simplistic, but it's all profit driven. United Healthcare, Humana, Cigna, all these companies, the more they deny care, the less they have to pay. I mean, they're still getting paid to provide the insurance, but if they can deny care, they get to keep that money. At some point you give up. Here's an example. I have a patient who has disabling knee arthritis. He is not a candidate for joint replacement therapy because of medical comorbidities and issues. And I submitted a prior authorization request for genicular artery embolization. And one of my staff was on hold for 30 minutes. And I said to her, you know what? I can't pay you to be on hold for 30 minutes. Sorry. Hang up the phone. And we gave up. I mean, because if I have to do that for every single case, I'll never get anything done. And that's all my staff will be doing is prior authorizations. Now, on her own, she went back and tried again and got the right person. So they're just making money. It's a simple equation, and Congress could do something about it. There is a bill before Congress called the Protecting Seniors. What is it, Bob? Protecting Seniors Medical Care Act or something?
Protecting Medicare and Seniors Act or something to that.
Yeah, something like that to put some limits on prior authorization. It's got so many co-sponsors, it's almost to the point, I forget the term, where they can introduce it on the floor without the Speaker of the House's approval. And we're working on getting those last few Congress people to sign on to it. But it's just money. It's sickening.
But yeah, but you brought up MSKs, and even I mean, obviously, we help a lot of providers with MSK lead generation, right? And the prior authorization can happen, but now they're even prior authorizing it and then not or paying and then saying, "Hey, never mind, we changed our mind."
Yeah. Well, let me give you two words there: plausible deniability. So we saw this with arterial cases, and Patrick alluded to the claudication debate that he's going to be participating in. And a lot of the companies for the arterial work have used the work of one or two authors who are primarily academics and really have been very critical of procedural utilization in the United States as essentially a smokescreen to deny coverage. Similarly with MSK, so musculoskeletal embolization, as you know, Rachel, is exploding in the United States. It is a minimally invasive procedure with a great deal of utility. And in the case of the genicular artery embolization, the GAE that Patrick just referenced, there's a little bit better at this point than 10 years worth of data, primarily out of Japan, that supports utilizing this. And I know that we have a couple of articles in press. There's an OEIS member who just was one of the primary authors of a big review article that should be coming out in JVIR shortly, which is really going to critically examine that evidence. And as it pans out, there's a lot of evidence for this. But one of the de facto ways that the insurance companies use plausible deniability is they label something experimental. And then in that case, they may say, well, no prior auth is necessary. But then they limit it experimental and then they deny it. So let's flip gears. So, I've been on clinical faculty at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center now for well over 12, 15 years. And I was one of the lead authors of something called the video trial, which was the trial that kind of definitively showed that using intravascular ultrasound, which is another core contention right now in the current environment, is necessary if you're doing iliac venous occlusive disease. But despite being a faculty member there, and despite being one of the lead authors, it took the insurance arm of UPMC another 2 years to get this off their, quote, experimental list. And during that time, there was no reimbursement. I paid actually for the catheter for every patient that I did because it was the right thing to do. But that was actually coming out of the practice's side, which is nuts because these billion-dollar insurance companies are using plausible deniability to float on the backs of independent physicians and small practices. It's insane.
So if that doesn't change, Dr. Tahara, and or reimbursements don't change, like what is the real risk to providers and to patients?
Well, the real risk is, like you said right up front, is access. So if everybody remembers the pandemic, and I can speak directly to Pennsylvania, and I'm sure that Patrick can speak to Tennessee. In Pennsylvania, the entire state during the pandemic for a 6-month period, I was one of 5 locations you could get a limb salvage procedure unless you were dying because the hospitals weren't admitting patients. They were overloaded. Right? We saw a bump in the people who were getting into trouble, and we saw a big increase in the OBL volume during that time because nobody could get taken care of anywhere else. So there's a direct access. That's a temporal example, but we actually have some literature that we've participated in, and Eric Semensky did a very nice review. He's a cardiologist from the Mass General or Harvard program that showed that OBLs provided a disproportionate amount of care to rural, inner city, urban, and disadvantaged populations. So that there is a legitimate access site of service issue for if you want to call them disadvantaged populations, like where I'm in a rural area where there's not much resource. But what's even more amazing is what's happened over the last 10 or 12 years. And more than 50% of these procedures have gone out of the hospital outpatient department and are now in the OBL or the ASC. So if the reimbursement doesn't keep up, or these gains of plausible deniability or just denials continue from these commercial payers and these Medicare disadvantaged populations, the real impact on this is that labs will have a cash flow crunch, practices. They will not be able to pay their staff. They will not be able to pay for their materials. And ultimately, they will have to cut back services, which is going to lead to a direct decrease in access because the hospitals can no longer accommodate this work. They're doing a different type of work, which is very valuable, but they can't accommodate most of this limb salvage volume that we're doing in the OBL. And Patrick can talk about this for his own practice, but I had no less than 3 calls this week from different practices around the country asking me, is it time for us to close our doors? What's going to happen with this particular problem that we were just handling with Noridian? And all the other commercials and the disadvantage plans have followed. So we have practices that have literally not gotten a dime of reimbursement for an arterial case for 5 weeks. And again, let Patrick can tell his story. You can't stay in business that way. And then if we shut our doors, there's an access problem.
Rachel, could I allow Bob's comments to dovetail into something that's happening literally this morning?
Please.
So we first heard about the Noridian issue, and that was kind of the canary in the coal mine, and OEIS, and by OEIS I mean me, Bob, Jerry Niedzwiecki, Badi Saab, all the members of the EC, and a few other people were on that literally like white on rice. One day later, we had a conference call with lawyers on the phone, a lobbyist. And by Monday, there were emails, and this is this past Monday, there were emails going out, sorry, 2 Mondays ago, there were emails going to Noridian, and the problem was solved about 3 days later. And Noridian came back and said, sorry, our mistake, we'll start paying, providers don't need to do anything. Well, now I kind of realized this week that I'm not getting paid by anybody for anything. Even Medicare, even straight Medicare patients, and those are supposed to go through, there's a law, it's like 13 business days or something. I'm getting nothing. My accounts receivable are through the roof. And I literally my revenue cycle is halted. And that's being faced on a text thread we're on here, that's being faced by providers all over the country. I can only survive on my I'll only go so far into my line of credit before I just have to throw up my hands and quit. But here's my point is OEIS is all over this. And in fact, I've already been in touch with our Medicare attorney, Paul Rudolph, who will be contacting every MAC out there Monday and CMS Monday. And the thing about Paul is he used to work for CMS. He knows every one of these people. He has their direct, he knows all their email addresses, and he's going to get right on it. And if anybody can fix it, OEIS and Paul can. But here's my main point. We are the only ones doing anything about this. The other societies, God bless them, it's all thoughts and prayers. But there's no action being taken, and we are doing all of the action. I mean, literally at 6:30 a.m., Bob and I are texting and emailing and doing stuff on a Saturday morning. And it's like that 7 days a week for us. And, we're crazy, Bob and me, and the other volunteers on the executive committee and the board, the larger board at OEIS. We do all this for free. It's all voluntary. We don't benefit directly from it at all, but we're so crazy passionate about doing the right thing for our patients and for all providers. We just aren't going to stop. I wish the other societies would do something. They have enormous budgets. They have 20 times the number of staff members, 20 times the number of doctors, and there's complete inactivity. I can't explain it. These people, I know most of these people, they're friends of mine, but it's thoughts and prayers. OEIS is the only society that has got boots on the ground, taking care of it immediately. Bob, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'd say there's a scale issue, and I think what Patrick just said is really critically important. Everybody at OES is a volunteer. That's kind of one of the big pushes on why we need new blood and more folks to join because, so for instance, I've been associated with the leadership now since 2014, right? So that's 12 years that I've been slogging away in the salt mine here. Patrick's inherited this and he's slogging away in the salt mine, but at some point you run out of people who have enough passion and enough motivation to do that. And it's always like the 90-10 law. I mean, you can go back to all these ancient texts like Sun Tzu that talks about, how of every 100 people in an army, 90 are basically cannon fodder, 8 or 9 get something done, and it's 1 that actually leads it through. And that scales out, unfortunately, to this. I do think one of the things with the other societies is the size and motivation issue, right? It's not that they're bad people. It's not that they don't support the mission. But what ends up happening is they're ponderous. They study things. It takes them 3 weeks to make a decision there's a real problem. By that time, as Patrick alluded to, we've already spent hours and hours and hours. We're already well on our way to a solution. So again, for the outpatient space, the slogan for OAS, one of the slogans used to be the voice of the outpatient space. And I think that is really true. And again, we lead a lot, and sometimes we lead a lot behind the scenes, and the goal is to get everybody aligned, because if you get everybody rowing in the same direction, it's better. But if we wait for one of the parent societies to actually land on an action item in a tactical issue like we were dealing with, and they're still dealing with payments and the cash flow crunch to these independent practices, people are going to shrivel up and die because it'll just take too long. And the other motivational thing, and I think this is an important one, and it is absolutely not to cast aspersion on anybody, but by and large, most of the folks involved with the other organized professional societies are either full-time academics or employed people. So they have a different set of priorities. It's not better or worse, but it's different. Or as you just heard from Patrick, that he's only going to go so far into his line of credit before he goes out of business. For me, I ended up loaning money back to my practice already so we could make payroll. I can do that.
That's what I'll be doing.
Yeah, I can do that on my personal funds for a month, maybe 2. But
Yes, I can survive for a while, but I can't pay for over $100,000 in payroll every month out of my pocket.
right, let alone consumables for continuing to do these procedures. I mean, some of these cases are extremely expensive to do, particularly multi-level limb salvage procedures. We might use a couple of devices, a couple of stents, a couple of balloons, a handful of, 0-8 wires. Some of these specialty wires are quite expensive, $200, $250 a piece. I've had cases I've used 10 wires on. Right, that's a couple of grand just in wire cost, and that evades people, especially when they look at the economics of the OBL. So it is really, really important that we get people to join, so we can have some other people who can help carry these flags forward.
Yeah, that's actually brings me to my next question for both of you is if you could speak to a physician that's on the fence, you know, of joining and becoming a member at OEIS, like what would you say? I mean, I think this right here is pretty in your face, but what would you say?
I'll try to tackle that one. If they're on the fence, so Joe's on the fence, or no, Sally is on the fence. I'd say, Sally, look, if you want to keep your OBL, if you want to keep your independence, if you want to not have a boss, if you want to dictate the quality of care, all of the quality of care for your patient, the only reason you've still got it probably is the OEIS, and the only way you're going to keep it is the OEIS. We need your help. Please come help us, and for God's sake, contribute to our political action committee. I tried to give you a sound bite there. It's just, if you have an OBL and you're not a member of the OEIS, it's kind of crazy, but go ahead, Bob.
I'll just add, and I've said this same sentence over and over the last 5 or 6 years. If you work in or you own an OBL and you don't belong to OEIS, you're really committing professional and financial suicide. Because if I just threw this out there, and again, I'm not trying to create division or cast dispersion, ask any vascular surgeon in America who's been advocating for the OBL. Unfortunately, the sentiment is not that it's the parent professional societies, right? So again, these are complementary, not competitive endeavors. But if you don't belong to your parent professional society and OEIS, you're committing professional and OBL suicide, because you're simply not going to stay in business. I mean, without getting into the weeds, there's a lot of work. So the other thing that OEIS has been characterized as over the years for advocacy, our effectiveness in helping reimbursement policy for the OBL is far disproportionate to both our size and how much resource we have, right? We, quote, punch above our weight class. So it is really critical, if you would like to maintain an OBL, to join the organization and to contribute to the PAC, because without the political action committee, guys like me don't have the resources to be able to sit down with the Congress folks and actually run through these things and educate them, because a lot of them simply don't know what we do.
You're headed there next week, right?
Yeah, I'm testifying before the PAD caucus on the 11th, which will be open to all Congress members as well as their staff, and we're anticipating pretty good turnout. And we've got physicians from all of the parent societies. So again, the Society for Vascular Surgery, the Society for Cardiac Angiography and Intervention, the Society for Interventional Radiology. And then I'm there specifically talking about reimbursement issues as OEIS and as a vascular surgeon.
That's awesome.
One more plug, if I may, Rachel. Being a member of the OEIS, if you come to our annual meeting, which is in mid-March in Las Vegas, it is the best meeting I've ever been to. Year after year, you go there, you don't hear about minutia, about operations that you're never going to do. What is the consistency of eye color within repair of complex aortic aneurysms? There's just sort of papers like that. You come to the OAIS. I mean, literally every presentation I learned something from, and 80% of them I can apply to my practice of medicine. So it's an amazing meeting. Jerry Niedzwiecki does it. He's the guru. It's fantastic. And it's in a cool location, Las Vegas, and you can see the Eagles while you're there at the Sphere.
Yeah, I've been to OEIS, I think 3 or 4 years now, and it's one of my favorite meetings for different reasons. I think the collaboration in the presentations and lectures really for me is different. I've gone to thousands of different types of conferences before where you bring in the key speaker and it's the whole high and mighty expert, where OEIS takes a panel of experts, right, with different opinions and different approaches. And every time after OEIS, seriously, I get phone calls saying, I learned this at OEIS. Oh my gosh, I never knew that till I went to OEIS. Or even, hey, there was a doctor on stage. I didn't catch his name. He was talking about XYZ. Do you know how I can get in touch with them? So I think that meeting is amazing. And I agree with you. I think anyone in the endovascular space, it's totally worth their time to go. I think it's planned strategically with the different types of lectures too, right? There's business talks, there's marketing, there's clinical, everything from case studies. I mean, I don't know, Dr. Tahara or Dr. Ryan, if you want to share. I haven't seen the agenda yet in detail for what's coming up, but it is in Vegas. So that is fun, right? At Caesar's Palace. I think it's the mid-March, the 18th through the 21st, something like that. I guess what I would want to ask you guys is if somebody is interested and wants to move forward and knowing more about OEIS, like, what's the next steps for them?
The easiest thing to do is you can go right on our website, OEIS Society with only one S, not two S's, .org or .com. And then there's all kinds of information there. It's certainly a great introduction to OES is to come to the annual meeting. Like Patrick said, the other thing that really sets that meeting apart is we track it, right? So it doesn't matter whether you've been in an OBL since the early days like me, whether you entered in the OBL after, or whether you're contemplating getting into the OBL. There is content which is geared to each of those audiences, and we always specifically do what we call 101 track to help people understand what it takes to do this and if this is the right fit for them. And those are really always well-attended and well-regarded lectures. This year, Patrick is doing an absolutely phenomenal session. I spent several years, even before I was president, and as did Patrick behind the scenes, trying to build intersocietal collaboration. And Patrick has really one-upped me on this one. He's got a formal session in the annual program called The Politics of Dancing, where he's gotten the leadership of all the major parent societies in the same room, on the same stage, to have a conversation about how do we align this advocacy. And that never would have happened without OEIS and Dr. Patrick Ryan, right? That is a very parochial thing to the way that we work because OEIS by design has always been multidisciplinary, roughly a third interventional radiologist, roughly a third cardiologist, and roughly a third vascular surgeons. There's nothing else like it, right? So the annual meeting really has a lot of value regardless of where you are in the continuum of wanting to be in an OBL or running an OBL or making your OBL better. And to echo Patrick, even though I'm oftentimes, moderating, designing, and doing parts of the program, I always learn something from these talks, whether it's on the section that I'm doing or whether it's on one of the other sections. And they're fantastic. And musculoskeletal embolization, we've had some great sessions on that, which is burgeoning. So again, come to the meeting if you want to look at OAS. That's a great next step. Go to the website. There's lots of information there, or you can reach out to either Patrick or me.
I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me. I'm easy to find.
Awesome. Okay. I mean, that was the closer right there for me. I don't really need to do anything else. I think anybody that watches this, if you have any questions about OEIS membership, the annual meeting, I encourage you to go. Again, I'm volunteering to do this as well, just like Dr. Tahar and Dr. Ryan said, everything.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone is volunteering, right? I find this is something with patient pro marketing, all of our clients are in the outpatient OBL space. So anything that we can do to support the organization as well, we're here for you guys. I'm excited to go to Vegas and see everybody and just really help grow your membership as we can and also just awareness for what you guys do. So thank you so much.
All right. Nice to see you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a great day, Bob. I'll see you later. I'm sure we'll be talking this weekend, Bob.
I'm around, as you well know. All right, guys.
Okay. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.